September 16th, 1943. Texas Hill Country. The convoy rolled slow beneath a wide American sky. Canvas-topped trucks carrying nearly 200 German prisoners of war, dust-covered, sunburnt, silent. Among them sat SS Unterscharführer Otto Reiter, 33 years old, Iron Cross, North African veteran, still bleeding pride. He squinted at the road signs: Austin, Fredericksburg, Kerrville, places he once mocked on maps. Cowboy towns, barbaric names. He whispered to the man beside him, "America can't even feed its own. We'll be chewing rats by sundown." The men laughed. Not much, but enough. They had just surrendered in Tunisia, but their minds still marched to Berlin. The truck turned past a Baptist church. Women in floral dresses waved. Children smiled. And then, something surreal happened. A young boy tossed a small American flag toward the truck, not in anger, but like a gift. Ryder looked away. Minutes later, the truck stopped. Not at a labor camp, not at a prison yard. A wooden mess hall stood in the shade of two pecan trees. The guard said nothing, just motioned toward the doors. Inside was silence. Clean tables, plates already set. On them, grilled steak, mashed potatoes, white bread, cold milk. At the end of the line, a scoop of vanilla ice cream, resting beside a can of Coca-Cola. No chains, no shouting, just the sound of a fan spinning in the rafters, and the smell of cinnamon pie. Ryder sat down. His hands trembled. For 3 hours, he said nothing. Not during the meal, not during roll call, not even when the others joked about escape. That night, in his diary, he wrote just one line: "If this is defeat, what does their victory look like?" Before the ice cream, before the pie, before the silence, there was belief, deep, marrow deep, that the American empire was an illusion. Back in Germany, the posters said it clearly: jazz, crime, chaos, a mongrel state pretending to be a nation. Films shown to Wehrmacht recruits painted Americans as soft, lazy, addicted to their comforts. Too many races, too many ideas, too little spine. Young Germans watched reels of soup lines from the Depression. New York, they were told, was collapsing. Detroit, dying. The Führer called them a nation of cowards dressed as gangsters, so they believed it. Otto Reiter believed it. He'd seen it in 1940, as France collapsed in 6 weeks. The Americans had done nothing. They'd hesitated while London burned. And so by 1942, when Ryder was deployed to North Africa with the 15th Panzer Division, his certainty was armor-plated. They were fighting British tanks, French rifles. No American steel ever reached his front. When whispers came that the Americans were landing in Algeria, he laughed. They'll surrender before they sweat. But the Americans did not surrender. Operation Torch brought waves of olive-drab columns, fresh-faced boys with chewing gum and Sherman tanks. They weren't elegant, they weren't quiet, but they were relentless. Ryder saw his first American bulldozer at El Getter. It was carving a road while under artillery fire. His captain muttered, "They build faster than we retreat." Still, when Ryder was captured in May of '43, hands up, boots dusty, pride fractured, he assumed the worst was still ahead. German high command had warned them capture meant torture, humiliation, a loss of honor. "Americans will humiliate you," one officer had warned. "They are ruled by Negroes and Jews." The last message Ryder received before boarding the POW ship read, "Steel your mind. Do not be fooled by their lies." He expected fists, hunger, hard labor. He was prepared to eat insects if it meant survival. The ship crossed the Atlantic in silence. No beatings, no cruelty, just music on the radio. Bing Crosby and Glenn Miller, drifting through the steel corridors. On the fourth night, Ryder stood on deck. A guard handed him a blanket. "It gets cold," the boy said. The boy, barely 20, called him sir. In that moment, something in Ryder flickered, just for a second. But the frost of ideology was thick, and it would take more than kindness to melt it, because Ryder still believed the Reich had time, that the Americans were rich but rotten, powerful but soft. He believed that until the trucks rolled into Camp Hearn, Texas, and the smell of grilled beef reached his nose before the gates even opened. The first sign something was wrong was the quiet. Not the kind of quiet that hides a rifle behind a barn door, but a Sunday morning quiet, lazy, still, with the smell of cut grass and engine oil. Camp Hearn didn't look like a prison. There were no snarling dogs, no spotlight towers, just a wide gravel path lined with pecan trees, and fences that looked more decorative than defensive. Otto Ryder stepped off the truck expecting shouting. Orders, boots in his back. Instead, he got a clipboard and a guard who said, "Welcome, sir. This way, please." That word again, sir. It rippled through the group like a stone in still water. Eyes narrowed, backs straightened. A few muttered, "This is the trick. They want us off guard." Inside the barracks, beds were lined with fresh sheets. Every man was given a towel, a bar of soap, and a copy of the Geneva Convention. Ryder stared at it like it was a snake, printed in English and German. Later that day, they heard music, real music, not the marching drums of propaganda films. A radio played Chattanooga Choo Choo. Outside, American guards sat on folding chairs, smoking, trading baseball cards. One even waved. "They are mocking us," one sergeant snapped. But no one laughed. The food came next, hot, served by men in white aprons. Ryder tried not to look impressed, but the soup had potatoes, real ones. After dinner, they were led to an open yard. Basketball courts, a library, a recreation hall with a stage. It wasn't heaven, but it wasn't hell, and that's what made it terrifying. Ryder leaned toward Feldwebel Hans Mertz, a quiet veteran from Kassel. Mertz was staring at a guard reading a comic book. "They're not afraid of us," Ryder whispered. Mertz didn't blink. "They're not even pretending to be." That night, Ryder couldn't sleep, not because of noise, but because of calm. He kept waiting for the crack of a baton, a scream, the proof that everything they'd been told was still true. But all he heard was crickets, and a distant train, and something else he hadn't heard in weeks. Laughter. By the second week, the confusion turned to unease. Otto Ryder had prepared his mind for labor, for crushing rocks, digging trenches, crawling through punishment. But instead, he was given a time card. The camp commander, a short man with tobacco-stained fingers, called it a work rotation. "You'll be sent to nearby farms," he said, "paid, fed, and returned by sundown." Paid? The guards passed around crisp paper notes, half-dollar bills, and told them they could buy chocolate, tobacco, postcards. One man asked, "What's the catch?" The American only shrugged. "You work, you earn." Ryder squinted. "Is this slavery in disguise?" That afternoon, he was handed a shovel and placed on a cotton field under a sky so wide it made Europe feel like a closet. The farmer, a gray-haired man named Henry, offered them lemonade before they began. "Drink slow," he said. "Texas heat kills faster than bullets." Nobody moved. Henry smiled. "Suit yourselves." By sunset, Ryder's shirt clung to his ribs, but the lemonade was still cold. The sandwiches were thick with ham, and nobody yelled. The next day, it happened again. and again. On the fifth day, something strange occurred. Ryder began to feel safe. He didn't trust the feeling, but it was there, like the warmth of sunlight after years in a tunnel. Back at camp, the daily routine was unchanged. Breakfast by 7, work or classes by 9, recreation at 5, Sundays off. Sundays. A group of prisoners was allowed to hold Lutheran services, even led the choir. Some requested paper to write home. They received envelopes, stamps, and encouragement. Even the meals followed a rhythm. Pork chops on Wednesdays, chicken on Fridays, and always, dessert, sometimes cake, sometimes cold pudding. But most nights, ice cream, real ice cream. One afternoon, Ryder watched a fellow POW drop his scoop. Without pause, a guard handed over his own bowl. "Don't want you to miss the good part," he said, grinning. The POW couldn't even say Danke. The library expanded weekly. German books, English newspapers. Someone found a copy of Stars and Stripes with an article titled, "Freedom Means Fairness, Even for the Enemy." Ryder read it twice. At roll call, rumors began to spread. One man claimed he saw American soldiers giving steak to Italian prisoners. Another said he heard of German POWs acting in stage plays, as Americans. Ryder listened, lips pressed tight. The others began to joke. "Should we lose another war? Maybe they'll send us to California." But in Ryder's chest, the laughter didn't land, because he felt the shift and didn't know what to do with it. His mind reached for hatred, but all it found was confusion and the faint taste of vanilla from the night before. The crack came on a Tuesday. The sun was brutal that afternoon, high over the Texas plains, where shadows were short and tempers shorter. Otto Ryder had been assigned to a new farm, larger, with cattle. He expected rough hands, coarse voices, the kind of American brutality they'd all been promised. Instead, he met Elroy McDaniel, 62, lean as fence wire, eyes like cornflower steel. McDaniel didn't speak much, just pointed toward the barn, then toward a pile of hay. Ryder worked without complaint. Hours passed. At noon, McDaniel walked out of the house carrying a metal tray, 2 thick steaks, 2 baked potatoes, cornbread, a glass of iced tea, and something else, something shimmering under the Texas heat. A small bowl of melting butter and sugar, peaches and cream. Ryder blinked. McDaniel set the tray on a wooden crate between them. "Too hot for beans today," the old man said. Then he sat down and started to eat. Ryder stood, frozen. McDaniel glanced up. "You earned it, didn't you?" No sarcasm, no judgment, just a man sharing lunch with another man. Ryder sat. He didn't speak. He didn't trust it. The steak was perfect, peppered, pan-seared, bleeding just a little in the middle. The peaches were cool, sweet, syrup sticking to his teeth. Afterward, McDaniel leaned back and pointed toward the barn. "That steer you fed this morning? He'll feed 20 soldiers next month." Ryder wiped his mouth with a cloth napkin. He hadn't tasted meat that tender since 1940. Later, as they loaded crates into the barn, McDaniel dropped one. The contents spilled. 6 full steaks hit the dirt. Ryder gasped, instinctively reaching to salvage them. McDaniel only shrugged. "Spoiled. Too long out in the sun." And then, with a flick of his wrist, he tossed them into the fire pit. Flames rose. The smell was instant, meat and ash and smoke curling into the blue. Ryder didn't speak the whole ride back to camp. That night, in his bunk, he opened his diary, the one he'd kept hidden beneath his mattress. He stared at the blank page for 10 minutes before writing one sentence. "They burn what we dream of." He didn't sleep. Because something had shifted, not just around him, but inside. The next morning, Otto Reiter sat in the camp library with a pencil in hand and no words to write. Around him, the other POWs played chess, read newspapers, wrote letters home. Some even practiced English, loudly, awkwardly, with laughter that sounded too free. Reiter wasn't laughing. He was staring at a stack of American magazines on the corner table. Life, Stars and Stripes, Popular Mechanics. He reached for one. The cover showed a grinning U.S. soldier holding a German rifle and a chocolate bar. Inside, there were photographs of factories, conveyor belts, women building airplanes. One article described a camp in Kansas designed specifically for Axis prisoners. The walls were painted, the beds standardized. The food calorie counted for enemy health. Enemy health. Reiter put the magazine down. His hands felt cold. A corporal named Rudy, a Bavarian with a mechanic's mind, sat beside him. "They've built an entire infrastructure," Rudy muttered. "For us." Reiter didn't respond. Later that day, a guard named Thompson offered him a cigarette. Reiter hesitated. "It's American," Thompson said, "but not poisoned. I swear." Reiter almost laughed. Almost. But took it anyway. They stood in silence. Smoke drifted into the dry air. Thompson pointed toward a row of parked trucks. "Every week, a shipment comes in from Houston. Food, books, paper, even musical instruments." Reiter raised an eyebrow. Thompson smiled faintly. "My brother died near Anzio. He never saw this side of the war." Reiter didn't answer. That night, he sat on his cot staring at a map drawn crudely by another prisoner, a logistics diagram. It showed rail lines, supply routes, warehouse hubs stretching from Texas to Ohio, all for POWs. A note at the bottom read, "Each camp consumes the equivalent of one German division every week." Across the room, someone was playing a harmonica, not a war tune, not propaganda. It was Home on the Range. Reiter closed his eyes. He remembered what the high command had said. The Americans are a loose mob, incapable of long campaigns. But what if that was the lie? What if they weren't chaotic? What if, God help them, they were organized? And worse, what if they were generous because they could afford to be? That night, Reiter wrote nothing, because for the first time in his military life, he felt small. By December, something broke. Not loudly, not all at once, but like ice cracking underfoot. Otto Reiter stood in the recreation hall watching a Christmas tree being decorated, by Americans and Germans together. The ornaments were homemade, paper stars, painted pine cones. Someone hung a ribbon that read, "Peace through honor." It wasn't a trick. It wasn't propaganda. It was unsettling. That night, Reiter sat with Feldwebel Hans Merz in the barracks. Merz was holding a small card sent from his family, smuggled, censored, blurred. It simply read, "The bombing hasn't stopped. We ration bread by the day. Heinz froze last week." Merz didn't cry. He just folded the card slowly and said, "They are lighting trees, while my nephew sleeps under rubble." Reiter didn't speak. The next morning, the camp hosted a concert. German songs, American hymns, even a few piano duets. A Luftwaffe officer named Karl Wendt was asked to play. Wendt had once flown over London. Now, he played Silent Night for the men who shot him down. After the applause, he stepped off stage and said quietly, "I used to think I was the future." No one replied. Later, Reiter joined a new labor group. They were tasked with unloading a truck shipment from an ice factory. Block after block of frozen cream, packed in straw. Over 400 gallons of ice cream. For prisoners. One man laughed bitterly. "We are fed like kings. Back home, they are eating soup made from bark." Reiter touched a frozen carton. It stuck to his fingertips. That night, In the mess hall, the Americans served roast turkey with cornbread stuffing. Every man got a full plate. Every man got dessert. The room was quiet. Ryder looked around and realized no one knew how to act. The hunger was gone, but so was the purpose. He found himself next to Carl Wendt again. Wendt spoke without looking up. I believed what they told me, that democracy was weakness, that kindness was a trick. He turned his fork in slow circles, pushing the pie around the plate. But this isn't weakness. Ryder asked, then what is it? Wendt met his eyes. It's strength, the kind we never understood. That night, the officers met in silence. No reports, no planning, just a question, heavy in the air. If they treat their enemies like this, what do they give their own? Ryder didn't sleep. He opened his diary and wrote, "They defeated us before we crossed the ocean, not with guns, but with the world they built behind them." They called it the engine. It wasn't an engine like a tank or a plane. It didn't roar. It didn't fly. But it moved. And everything moved with it. By January 1944, Otto Ryder had begun asking questions, quiet ones, about the trucks, the rail lines, the crates with color-coded markings. He wasn't the only one. Rudy, the Bavarian mechanic, had started sketching diagrams in the barracks, not of tanks, but of delivery schedules. Every Tuesday, he said, pointing, they bring frozen goods, meat, milk, vegetables. He flipped the page. Every Friday, spare parts, books, paper, boots. Ryder raised an eyebrow. How do you know? Rudy tapped his watch. They run on time. At Camp Hearn, over 4,800 POWs were fed daily. Each meal contained protein, starch, fruit, dairy. Menus were rotated, allergies recorded, portions logged, not by soldiers, but by civilian nutritionists. The kitchens ran on shifts. The food arrived in pre-packed containers. Every item was labeled with a camp number, delivery time, storage temp. Even the butter had a serial code. Look at this, Rudy muttered one day, holding a tin of beans. Packed in Illinois. Last week. They crossed 5 states for this. Ryder said nothing. He was watching the horizon, where another truck convoy was rolling in. 6 vehicles, all identical, all spotless. From the top of the mess hall roof, he saw the pattern. 1 truck per food group, each lined up to its own warehouse. Unload, replace, return. Efficient, quiet, relentless. And it wasn't just this camp. From the library files, donated by Red Cross and even some American volunteers, Ryder learned that the U.S. had built over 500 POW facilities across the country, each with standardized infrastructure, each with medical stations, each with a fully stocked canteen. The numbers staggered him. Camp Hearn alone required over 3,000 pounds of meat per week, 4 tons of flour, 2 tons of vegetables, and this was just one camp. He read aloud from a document. Transportation Priority Class C, German POW sustenance, to be coordinated alongside domestic civilian aid. Civilian aid? They fed their enemies, while still feeding their unemployed? The German war machine, in 1943, was feeding troops with horse meat and canned cabbage. Frontline soldiers went days without hot food. And yet here, thousands of miles from the battlefield, prisoners were eating better than officers at the Reichstag. Ryder walked through the storage sheds that afternoon. He ran his hand along the crates, the cans, the boxes stamped with U.S. Army quartermaster codes. They were organized by day, by region, by need, and somewhere in his chest, pride began to rot. It wasn't just food. By February, Otto Ryder realized he wasn't in a prison. He was inside a machine. and the machine thought of everything. It began with spoons, not forks, not knives, spoons. The camp received a shipment of 12,000 stainless steel spoons, all identical, each stamped with U.S. property, POW. "Why not mix?" someone asked. "Why not send a few dozen at a time?" Rudy answered without looking up from his schematics. "Because mixing breaks rhythm. And rhythm is everything." That word echoed in Ryder's skull. Rhythm. Every system in the camp was modular. Trucks had interchangeable parts. Barracks followed the same design, from Texas to Idaho. Cafeteria layouts were identical, down to the hooks on the pantry doors. A man could move from Camp Hearn to Camp Concordia and not miss a step. One morning, Ryder overheard an American officer speaking with a supply clerk. "If the beans don't arrive, use the Kansas route. They've got surplus." Surplus. That word hit harder than any rifle crack. America didn't just build enough. They built more, in case the first batch didn't arrive on time. Ryder thought back to his old captain in Tunisia, counting bullets by the dozen, fuel by the liter. Here, the guards threw away food untouched. Not because it spoiled, but because it was extra. Then came the trucks. A convoy arrived one afternoon with 6 trailers, not for the prisoners, but for the staff. Inside were uniforms, toothbrushes, chess sets, tobacco, phonograph needles, paper clips, light bulbs, aspirin, and more cans of peaches. And at the end of the line, 2 refrigerated trucks, full of ice cream, vanilla, chocolate, strawberry, loaded into freezers powered by mobile generators, to be served to men who, just 6 months ago, had been firing on Allied troops. One SS officer walked out of the mess hall, holding a cone in silence. He sat under a pecan tree and wept. Ryder watched from a distance. They had trained for combat, for capture, even for starvation. But no one had trained them for this, to be fed by the enemy with a kindness so methodical it became terrifying. That night, Ryder wrote, "They do not fear losing, because they do not fear replacing. People, parts, trucks, meals. Even if we kill one, there are 10 more behind him, ready, smiling, and on time." He looked at the spoon in his hand. It was polished, durable, unbendable, just like the system. Otto Ryder once believed in numbers, panzer divisions, caliber sizes, fuel efficiency. The Reich had measured everything, and so had he. But those numbers no longer mattered. In Camp Hearn, the numbers were different. They were colder, larger, and they didn't scream. They hummed. In just 1943 alone, America had shipped over 400,000 German prisoners to camps across the homeland. Each one required shelter, clothing, and 3 full meals a day. That's over 1.2 million meals every day. More than the daily rations for an entire German army group. Ryder found a page in a military magazine, left in the library by an American guard. It read, "The United States produces 1 airplane every 6 minutes. He checked the math. That's 240 aircraft every day. 1,680 a week. Over 96,000 planes in 1943 alone. That was more than the entire Luftwaffe at its peak. And those weren't propaganda numbers. They came with diagrams, charts, factory photos, women in overalls welding the wings of victory. America didn't just build machines, they built people to build machines. A workforce of 16 million, many of them women, many of them volunteers. One report showed that the average American tank crew received ice cream at the front, packed in dry ice, dropped from the air if needed. The Germans, meanwhile, were still boiling potatoes in helmets. In another camp, Italian POWs were given classical sheet music. In Arizona, Japanese POWs were allowed to run gardens. In Wisconsin, German officers played tennis with American guards, not because the Americans were soft, but because the system allowed for it. Because behind every act of generosity was a factory, a train, a pipeline, a ledger. One of Ryder's former commanders, captured months earlier, had written a letter back from Camp Shelby. They burned 2 million gallons of fuel just to stop my retreat. I lost an entire division to take a town that rebuilt itself in 3 weeks. Ryder read it twice. He began to wonder, what if we never stood a chance? What if we weren't outnumbered, but outpaced, outproduced, outplanned, outspent? One American soldier had once told him, "We don't aim to kill you, we aim to bury you in things you can't match." Ryder thought it was bravado. Now he realized it was math, and math doesn't lie. The final statistic came from a Red Cross report. It said, "Per Geneva rules, all POWs must be treated with dignity. The U.S. has decided to go beyond that, because dignity isn't the ceiling, it's the floor." That line stayed with him, because in every bowl of ice cream, every clean cot, every blank sheet of letter paper, he saw the ceiling, and knew it was far above them. March 1944. Texas wildflowers began blooming near the camp gates. Bluebonnets, sunflowers, and something red Ryder couldn't name. He walked slower now, not because of age, but because the world felt heavier. On Sunday morning, the chapel held a joint service. American guards sat in the back. German POWs filled the pews. They sang in 2 languages, same tune, Amazing Grace. Ryder didn't sing. Instead, he watched a boy, American, no older than 20, polish the floor near the altar. The boy smiled at him, waved. He looked like the brother Ryder once had. After the service, Ryder returned to the barracks and opened his diary. He flipped back through the pages. Tunisia, the transport ship, the first bowl of soup, the peaches, the ice cream, the spoon. So many entries began with disbelief. Some ended in rage, but more and more, they ended in silence. That afternoon, a Red Cross visitor arrived. He asked the German officers if they had complaints. Ryder stepped forward. The translator waited. He said nothing. Not because there was nothing to say, but because no words felt honest enough to hold the weight of what he now understood. Later that week, the guards allowed them to plant trees beyond the fence. As they worked, one American handed Ryder a tin of seeds. "Wildflowers," he said. "Good for the soil." Ryder took it with both hands. The same hands that had once loaded ammunition now cupped the beginning of something fragile. That night, Ryder sat by the window and watched the sun fall behind the distant hills. He took out his diary, the last page nearly full. He wrote, "We came to destroy them. They fed us instead." Then he closed the book and didn't open it again.